Have you ever wondered how a single bureaucratic maneuver could bring the world's most trusted farm equipment maker to its knees? It didn't erupt as a scandal or a titanic political showdown. Instead, one unassuming change in Canada, a fresh layer of customs procedures, stifled the flow of critical parts, and overnight the agricultural machinery landscape was upended. John Deere, America's green and yellow icon, found itself gasping for air. Factories in Iowa sat silent. Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas echoed with empty assembly lines. Dealers stared at barren showrooms. And farmers, mid-harvest season, were left clutching empty parts bins and mounting anxiety. At first, workers thought the holdup would be brief. Morale managers insisted shipments were just delayed. But days bled into weeks, and no axles, hydraulic pumps, or electronic modules crossed the border. Production lines paused indefinitely, with no contingency plan in sight. Generations of Deere employees, some with 30 or 40 years under their belts, arrived at dawn to discover their stations cold and motionless. Rumors swirled of layoffs. Some whispered that Deere's entire U.S. operation might vanish. When the crisis dragged on, panic set in. Families used their savings to cover bills. Attempts to source components elsewhere faltered. Specialized Deere parts couldn't be replicated or rushed into existence. Domestic manufacturers lacked capacity. Alternative suppliers quoted lead times measured in months, not days. With the heart of America's farm equipment production paralyzed, Deere's carefully balanced strategy, built on just-in-time logistics and trusted cross-border ties, was exposed as a liability. By month's end, the first pink slips went out. Hundreds of seasoned workers were sent home, told they might be called back if parts arrive. Dealers fared no better. In rural Iowa and Nebraska, farm towns that had lived and breathed Deere suddenly confronted empty shelves. Farmers arrived expecting replacement bearings or sealed bearing hubs, only to hear, "Sorry, we have nothing to sell." Showrooms once gleaming with new tractors, combines, and planters were now dusty shells. In places where John Deere wasn't just a brand, but a way of life, this felt like betrayal. As the green and yellow fervor cooled, farmers faced stark choices. Some scoured classifieds for used parts or equipment from other makes. Others grudgingly eyed foreign brands. Practicality won over patriotism when crops waited. Buyers discovered that BYD, Kubota, CLA, and Fendt, brands once dismissed, now offered reliable machines with parts in stock. Chinese manufacturers moved swiftly, leveraging deep production capacity to flood U.S. dealerships with affordable tractors and harvesters. European companies, long known for premium but niche offerings, expanded their networks and slashed delivery times. Meanwhile, state governments grew restless. With Washington slow to act, governors from Michigan, Iowa, and Ohio opened direct talks with Canadian trade officials, pleading for relief to prevent economic collapse in farm communities. Some states explored incentives for foreign manufacturers to build U.S. plants, bypassing tariffs altogether. These governors, ironically, many staunch Trump supporters, found themselves negotiating behind the administration's back, desperate to keep their regional economies afloat. Back at Deere headquarters, panic morphed into a belated scramble. Leadership unveiled plans to ramp up domestic production, retrofitting dormant Iowa and Illinois factories. Yet this pivot came at a staggering cost. Idle machines demanded costly upgrades, and suppliers, enticed by foreign brands, were slow to return. Workers hired back into chaotic plants lacked clear direction. The company's stock slid further as investors lost confidence in management's crisis response. Across the Pacific, Japan's automotive sector watched with alarm. Toyota and Honda, whose U.S. plants enjoyed tariff exemptions, now faced uncertainty as America's trade policies rocked interdependence. In emergency meetings, Japanese officials and executives debated imposing retaliatory measures on U.S. exports. Ultimately, they opted instead to bolster production abroad, expanding U.S. facilities in Kentucky and Ohio, and diversify markets in Southeast Asia and Europe. Yet unions and citizens, worried about potential U.S. retaliation, staged protests demanding government support for domestic jobs. Not waiting for bureaucratic shifts, China and South Korea leapt into the breach. BYD announced 2 new assembly plants in Texas and California, focusing on cost-effective electric tractors and harvesters. NIO forged dealership partnerships, offering dealer incentives and service guarantees. Hyundai accelerated expansion at Alabama and Georgia plants, rolling out a new electric crossover to woo eco-minded farmers and rural families. Their strategy was twofold: localize production to skirt tariffs and forge ties with U.S. suppliers to cement resilience. As these Asian powerhouses entrenched themselves, Europe's luxury automakers found themselves in a bind. Mercedes and BMW, accustomed to commanding premium prices, now struggled to maintain market share amid surging imports of affordable, dependable machinery. The European Union debated whether to shield its automotive titans with subsidies or open the door wider to U.S. buyers, but indecision only invited further incursions by non-European brands. Back home, the shockwaves of Deere's shutdown rippled through every slice of the Midwest. Cafes closed early as fewer factory workers filtered in. Hardware stores saw sales slump. Main Street banks faced rising delinquencies as farm income stalled. In town hall meetings, rural voters voiced frustration, not only at Canada's tactical maneuver, but at Washington's failure to foresee the fallout from aggressive trade policies. Where once a hardline stance on tariffs seemed patriotic, now it felt ideologically rigid and economically damaging. Grassroots movements sprang to life, pressuring Congress to craft balanced policies, protect domestic manufacturing without strangling supply chains essential for American industry. Opinion polls showed even loyal Trump backers reconsidering their stance, favoring pragmatic solutions over partisan rhetoric. In many ways, the crisis revealed a new political dynamic in the heartland, a willingness to trade ideological purity for economic stability. Amid this upheaval, unexpected alliances formed on U.S. soil. Deere forged partnerships with community colleges to retrain laid-off workers for advanced manufacturing roles. Some states offered tax credits to any farm equipment maker, foreign or domestic, willing to set up shop and guarantee parts availability. Farmers' cooperatives pooled resources to import components in bulk. In places like Nebraska and Kansas, regional consortia negotiated directly with overseas suppliers to establish U.S. distribution centers, ensuring future parts never again languished at the border. By early next spring, the landscape had shifted dramatically. Deere's domestic plants hummed back to life, albeit at reduced output, and foreign brands maintained a foothold. Farmers, once monolithic in their Deere loyalty, now viewed a broader array of options, judging equipment on availability and performance rather than heritage. Dealers, too, diversified their portfolios, stocking multiple brands to hedge against future disruptions. What began as a quiet bureaucratic tweak in Ottawa blossomed into a chapter of global realignment. It underscored the fragility of just-in-time logistics, the volatility of political trade maneuvers, and the agility of well-resourced competitors. For American farming, it served as a wake-up call. Tradition and branding can only carry you so far without resilient supply chains and flexible strategies. The question now is whether U.S. industry will heed the lessons, build adaptable systems, cultivate diverse supplier networks, and craft trade policies that bolster domestic strength without turning strategic vulnerability into opportunity for rivals. Otherwise, America's fields, once plowed and harvested by the hum of John Deere machines, may increasingly echo with the engines of foreign-built tractors, reminders of a day when bureaucratic red tape rewrote the map of global agriculture.